All right. Hey, you guys. It is Lisa Nicole Alexander with a deeper look into domestic violence. And I am honored to have our next guest, Miss Anita Bentata. And she is all the way from Australia, you guys. So this is just going to be an amazing podcast. And I'm super excited. Hi, Anita.
Hi, it's so exciting to be talking with you.
I'm super excited to have you guys. We have an amazing domestic violence expert here. She's an author, she's a speaker, she's a trainer, and I'm just overwhelmed by just our little chat before we started. And you guys are going to love this. So I encourage you, if you know someone who's experiencing abuse, if you've experienced it yourself, have them tune in, share this podcast with them. You do not want them to miss it. Okay, so we're going to dive right in because this lady has just so much. It's not even going to fit in an hour. So anyway. Okay, so Anita, if you can please just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to get into this field of work.
Sure. I used to work in accounts and bookkeeping, and I knew after I would have my children that I would want to do something different. I was just felt like I'd want to do something more with people, but I didn't know what. And then the years went by and I ended up having to escape myself with my two little girls from domestic violence. And I went into therapy to make sure it never happened again. And after a couple of years of therapy, I thought, oh, I think I want to help other women. I know what it's like to live with domestic violence, and now I've got the qualification. I went in to do the qualification. But what I did was, because I knew as a client what someone needs as a therapist, and because I was a mature age student and a single mum, and my children were in a lot of trauma, it was like I only want to do what's really going to be helpful for my clients and for me. And so I did the basic degree, the qualification, but as we were talking before, it's the same in the States, that the basic psychology or counselling qualification only talks superficially about trauma and abuse, and it doesn't work in depth. And when I was working in the field, I just knew, because of my own journey, that we need more than that. And so I went and did an additional 4 years. So I ended up doing 7 years. Wow. To make sure that, that 4 years was specifically to do with trauma and abuse and developmental trauma and working with the unconscious and, the mind and the body. And so then I was working one-on-one with clients for over 2 decades. And then we've got a huge domestic violence issue in Australia, and I've started feeling frustrated. We've got one woman murdered a week. And the police all around Australia are going to a domestic violence incident every 2 minutes.
Oh my goodness. So, every 2 minutes they're going to a domestic violence incident.
Yes.
That is enormous. That's huge.
It is.
Wow.
And so I thought, I love working one-on-one, but I want to reach more women. And so I started changing my practice to be able to reach more women so that I could create change quicker for more women, because, my heart goes out to any woman that thinks that she has to live with triggers and trauma for her life and suffer for years. So I've been working for coming up to 25 years and have distilled all of the essentials in what I teach women now, so that I feel like there were certain things we didn't learn as a child, and I've developed my own theories about some things from the work that I've done, but also from my personal journey. And I want women to have things easier and enjoy life.
Yeah, so that's awesome. That's amazing. I'm super excited about that. I really like how you talk about coming up with your own theory as well. So that's going to be really interesting if the other one is over there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to ask you some specific questions. I know that you talked about your own children dealing with trauma. Is that part of the reason that you decided to go into trying to understand the depths of trauma?
Well, when I was working with clients and my own journey, because as well as falling into domestic violence as a young woman, I grew up with a lot of trauma and neglect and abuse, and a lot of walking on eggshells, and not physical abuse, but a lot of control, and learning that I've got to be the way other people want me to be loved and accepted. And that people around me weren't interested to get to know my feelings, my needs. And so I didn't have a connection to my feelings or needs. And so when I was in domestic violence and I was feeling upset and I didn't like what I was in, I was like swimming in these feelings and I didn't know how to engage with them. It was like that, you know, as a psychotherapist, I can understand my anxiety level was so high that, you know, when we're in a state of stress and when we're in overwhelm, that equals trauma. As soon as we're in overwhelm, our system doesn't have the resources, the safety, or the support to integrate what's going on in our experience. So what happens in our brain is the two hemispheres, they disconnect. The corpus callosum, the nerve fibers that feed the information between the two hemispheres, disconnects, saying, I can't take in all this input. It's too much. And ideally, in an optimal situation, we're meant to, when we're in a safe, supported, resourced space, then we're meant to go back to it to be able to integrate it so that those neural pathways can go to their natural conclusion instead of being left with the survival beliefs and the limiting beliefs about how we need to be in the world.
Okay.
And so when I was learning that in my own healing, then it had taken me a lot of therapists to find a therapist that could go beyond the surface. And so I was just so passionate to help every woman. My children, you know, they had a lot of trauma through their whole childhood. One of them was very aggressive and would sometimes be very regressive, in very childish and baby-like, but a huge bully to her sister, to the cousins, to the kids at school. And so she'd swing from being a bully or like a baby, you know, overwhelmed by everything. My other daughter was very quiet and passive, and she held everything in. It was like the other daughter was so demanding, it was like she just kind of disappeared in a sense. And in a sense, that's more troublesome when a child isn't putting it out there. So they both did their coping mechanisms, and I tried as best as I could to help them through their childhood and teach them healthy ways to be with their feelings and give them consequences and be consistent about it. But I felt like nothing was working, particularly for my daughter that was being very oppositionally defiant, very aggressive. And I remember one day my doctor saying to me, Anita, don't worry, you'll see that she's taken everything in. It will work out. And she's right. My girls are both in their 30s now. They're both in beautiful, healthy relationships. And I have 3 gorgeous grandchildren. And so you can create an incredible change for your children, even while they're going through a lot. It can really transform and not go into their whole life. So
I'm so glad that you said that too, because let me just go back and ask you a question. The trauma that they were experiencing, was it because of the abusive relationship that you were in? Is it from growing from what they saw? Is that where it came from?
Yeah, from what they saw from him to me, but he was also abusive to them. He used to put handcuffs on my eldest daughter. He used to, you know, he was very, very controlling, you know, the way their hair was, the way they dressed, the way they, absolutely, the control was really severe. But there was also physical fights, play fights with the kids. And so they would get hurt in that. And you know, they'd see him throwing things, getting angry.
So they experienced it physically themselves, but they also saw it happening as well. And I love that you fast forwarded to them being in their 30s in healthy relationships. You have beautiful grandchildren. And I think for those women, those moms that are listening, just so you know, that change can happen in your children. You know, but I want to highlight too that you took the time. Did they go to therapy and things like that? Did they get the help that they needed?
Well, I was really careful when they were growing up to not bring up about the domestic violence. Not that I was pretending that it didn't happen, because if someone asked me a question, I was very open. I would say I left because of domestic violence, but I never went into the details in front of them because they'd lived through it all, and I didn't want to flood them with overwhelm. And I really understood from the work that I'd done that they need to compartmentalize that while they're growing up so that they can establish their identity, establish friendships, do the developmental tasks that children are meant to do. So when they would come back from contact visits and I would see them very distressed, I would offer myself to talk, but I never made them talk about anything to do with the past or what was happening now, because I understood that their system knew what they needed to do. And I just taught them healthy exercises on how to express their anger or to comfort them or to soothe themselves. And so they didn't talk about what they lived with as a child when they were growing up. And I was kind of waiting for the day, I thought, when they get a bit older, they'll start talking to me about it. And they didn't. Wow. And that was really interesting because part of me wanted to talk and hear from their perspective, but they didn't. And what ended up happening was when they became parents, that becoming a mother triggered some things for them. And so then they both went into therapy after they became mothers. Certain life stages brings up things. And so it had to be, because in any form of abuse, there's control happening. To me, it was so important that they have control over their life and I'm not hurrying them up to be where I want them to be or to realize what I want them to realize, that I had to allow them to have their own journey. And so it was
That's so powerful. That's powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah.
So then they did go into therapy. And look, my youngest daughter, she'd had it in one sense worse because the abuse that was happening to me while she was in utero and the abuse that she witnessed being in the bedroom with us because of having the cot in there. Whereas my other daughter was actually from another father. And so she had like 4 years without that. So she had, her central nervous system didn't have the same impact. Like, it still impacted her massively, but also it wasn't her father. So then after we escaped, I could support her to be angry about him, and it was, she didn't have conflict about being angry about him.
Right.
Whereas my other daughter, she had conflict because it was her father and he was imploring her to love him and see him as amazing. Right. And so when my daughter, whose father it was, became a mother, as I said, certain life stages, things come up. And the uncanny thing was when she turned the age that I was when we escaped, and her daughter was the age that she was when we escaped, it was just coincidental.
Wow.
She had a breakdown and she couldn't eat, talk, look after her child. And I had to move in, do trauma work with her, also get her linked into a trauma therapist. So because I couldn't do it all because it's too close for her to say some things to me. She needs to not worry about how I'm affected. And so she went through some very difficult couple of years of that, but it's clear now. And I think she's 30 and, you know, she's in her 30s and she's good. She's in a really good space.
You know, what I love about that is you just really allowed your children to process at their own pace. You know, oftentimes, even as mothers, we want to fix you and make you better. And, you know, you let them process at their own pace. It took her till her 30s, you know, and having her own child that triggered it. And even still, you allowed her to process, which I just love. And I think it's really important. Like, we want to heal our children. We want them to process, you know, the way we did, but that's not the way that it works, you know?
Yeah.
And I also want to go back. Oh, go.
Sorry, but I just want to emphasize, but I showed them all through their childhood how to be with uncomfortable feelings. And so I think that helped, you know, set something up later that they would then come to me and say, this is going on, what can I do? And so I could help them fast track their process to get past it, because they'd experienced not only me showing it with them, but because after we escaped and I didn't have much money, I put whatever money I had into my own therapy, not theirs. They were going to therapy, but it was the free ones. So it wasn't, free ones don't tend to go in depth, but I went to the trauma therapy and I worked on myself so that then I could not only be better in myself, but I could be able to be there for my children. And so they saw me transform over the years. And I think that's really powerful. We all believe what we feel and hear, and not what we hear with words, but the actions. And I think that helped them to be able to come to me and create a change because they'd seen and experienced it in me.
I agree. And, I'm taking notes as we talk because I wanted to go back to that. You talk about when you left, you went back to therapy to make sure that it wouldn't happen again. So I'm going to break this down because I think it's important for the listeners to realize and survivors to realize we have to become whole. We have to heal. We have to take the time to process, or we're not going to be any good moving forward. And you hit it. You said, I want to make sure that doesn't happen again, because one of the questions that I get all the time is, well, how do I know it's not going to happen in my next relationship? Or I keep getting abused relationship after relationship after relationship. And I always said, well, did you go to therapy? Did you take any time to heal? What was your process after getting out of the first one?
Yeah.
So I love that you did that.
Oh, it was life-saving. It was really essential. But I learned so much through the in-depth psychotherapy, and I learned more about the theory of it when I studied to be a psychotherapist, and that helped me even more. So I can help other women quicker than I could help myself, because I've been able to pull things together that are really important for women and men that are in toxic, abusive relationships. So like there's certain things, like when I was growing up, I had to act as if what was not loving was loving, because I was dependent for survival, for life, because my brain hadn't finished developing, because it doesn't finish till we're in our 20s. We don't have that sophisticated processing. And so I also had to act as if what was unsafe was safe. And so then when I met someone, it was like when the chemicals light up about attraction, it's attraction of what I know, what's familiar, not what is love. So there's that trauma bonding, and we perceive it, we label it as love, but it's a matched patterning about trauma, or it's not safe.
Yeah, that is so good. That's a whole lesson by itself right there. How someone can have their own trauma and connect with someone, because through the trauma. But I want to go back to what you said about going into therapy, and I love when you talked about allowing your children to sit in their own uncomfortable feelings, and I think that's really important. And I always say it's too. Kids are good. Their mom, the kids get their energy from her as well. And I think that it's so important that we as moms become healthy so that our children can become healthy too. Of course, in their own time, but it's important. We can't be a wreck and expect our children to be healthy. That's not what we're portraying for them,
Yeah.
And I really love how you did that. And I think it's so important to even let them sit in there and comfort. It hurts. It doesn't feel good. Tell me how you feel, and allow them to express that. So sorry, go ahead. Didn't mean to.
No, don't apologize. We're just both so excited, and I just wanted to jump in because I've got all these things going around, probably no doubt like you, that I want to share. I remember one day I came back from therapy, and I never talked to my children about what I processed in therapy, but it was just uncanny, because my daughter, who was a teenager, started sharing with me about, because of childhood, like she didn't go into the detail, but because of that impact, she had difficulty being with pleasure. And that was exactly what I'd just been working on in the therapy session.
Wow.
So we have this incredible connection with our children. And the more we can focus on what's underneath, why we do what we do, why we feel and think what we feel. And so it wasn't just me. The thing I think with children is that we want to help them to be able to engage with it and let it go, because children get stuck because they don't know how to move on when they're in a state of some sort. Even when it's an excited state, they're all excited, find it hard to wind down to go to do the next thing. So children need help to transition, and that's where a lot of trauma happens, because it's not the actual event that's traumatic, it's that we haven't had the support to be able to transition from it, and it's like we fall through the gaps.
Wow, that's deep.
Yeah.
So what would you say to, go. No, go.
No, go on.
I was going to ask. Okay, yeah. So for a survivor who's currently in a relationship, who is dealing with the trauma day after day, you have that. We talked a little bit about how you're in this traumatic situation, but your body is supposed to go down and calm down and process and heal and move forward. But if you're walking on eggshells from episode to episode, situation to situation, what do you suggest for someone who's listening, who's currently in an abusive relationship, dealing with that everyday trauma?
Yeah, look, it's really tricky when you're in it, because you're in that, like you just described, you're in this overwhelm every day. And as I said before, it means that your system's in the stress response. It's that emergency mode where you're putting out the spot fires. It's not about being with the big picture. But if you can start either on your own or with someone, it is helpful to do it with someone that has skill on how to navigate the uncomfortable and threatening context of what you're in, to look at what your biggest fear is. Because one of the things that I found is that when I escaped, I didn't have ticked off on a list of that I've got money, that I've got safety, that, all of those things. When other professionals say these are the reasons why people stay in abusive relationships, I don't believe they are the reasons why. They're obstacles, and they're serious and relevant and important, but they're not the reason why, because I don't know many women that have those items ticked off and now they can leave because the reasons are taken care of.
Right. That's good. That's true. That's very true.
Yeah. So for me, the thing to do with when we're in a difficult situation is to look at what our biggest fear is, and we need some mind-body tools and some support to be able to process that, so our anxiety and fear goes down, so we can actually take some action. And so being able to explore with someone what the biggest fear is and how can you take care of that, because it's only going to get worse when you're in the relationship.
So because of the biggest fear, they're unable to take steps to move forward or to get out or anything like that. Do you think it's because of that fear?
I think the biggest fear blocks them from taking steps, but I think behind it all is a deep not valuing of yourself. I think that's the biggest block.
Yeah. Not valuing, you said, right?
Yeah, not valuing yourself, because it's like I was so focused on what he needed or what my children needed, and I was acting like I can handle this. And this is what happens in stress and trauma. Yeah, we overemphasize what we can handle and what we can control. We think we can manage it. I used to think when he'd do the play fights, I'd run around and move the furniture so the kids wouldn't get knocked. I thought I was having some control and being able to be protective in some kind of way, but it wasn't. I was deceiving myself.
Wow.
It's like the control is getting your children and yourself out of such a toxic environment. And so for me, I never looked at how much this is impacting me, how much, and it becomes normal, and we minimize how much we're impacted. And often it's only after we've escaped that we realize the level of stress that we were in. So
that's so true. That is so true, because we've lived with it, and it's a state of being at this point. It's a state of being. You just live with it every day. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think when we truly love ourselves, we wouldn't tolerate all of that. We would go, this is not okay. So at some point, there's been some disconnect about honoring our life energy, about our essence of who we are. But in talking about our essence of who we are, the reason I kind of leaned across before is because what we were talking about, I just feel like this is really important, and I want to share this, these little babushka nesting dolls. It's like often we identify with being damaged, or there's something wrong with us, and I describe that as that's our outer symptomatic self. That's our coping self. But you know how inside all the dolls there's a little one? That is your true essence. Yeah. And all the layers are from the different ages where we learn different coping mechanisms, but underneath it all is your pure, undamaged whole self that doesn't need fixing, that isn't broken.
Wow.
But our conscious mind always takes things very literally and perceives that that outer one is us.
Our true self. Right.
So even if you're in a relationship still, to be able to go, this is my coping self, my whole self is still complete and pure and sacred, or, you know, whatever words are meaningful for you. I think it's important that we make that distinction and just hold an intention. So I want this one to live free, and see what unfolds when you start to open up to connecting to this one in you. Then you'll start to see other opportunities rather than just that survival pattern.
Yes, I love that. And you guys, if you're listening on the podcast, hop over to YouTube, because you'll kind of see the demonstration that she used to just explain that. And it was powerful. And I totally agree with you. It's so funny you said that, because it's like, okay, let me go back, because I have a couple things that I wrote down that I want to talk about. First of all, I think self-esteem is huge. And people, I think I shared something on my page the other day, and somebody, you know, kind of got offended, but it's not about, you know, her self-worth or her self-esteem. But, you know, if you go back, it really is. Because a woman who is confident and knows who she is and knows what she deserves is not going to tolerate or accept someone mistreating her.
Yes.
You're just not. And I think that's important to recognize. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I can also get some not so encouraging comments from people and say I'm victim blaming. And and I think absolutely this doesn't remove the responsibility and the accountability from the other person, but we do have to look, we live in a culture, and there is a history for women to not have their power. And so for me, that's what I'm so passionate about now. We have such untapped power that we can access when we have the support and the skills to be able to access it. And I agree. Like, if I think I got caught in domestic violence, my two elder sisters didn't get caught in domestic violence. We grew up in the same family. So it's not just a matter of what our history was. It's a matter of what we access in ourselves. And I can understand, as from a psychological point of view, why I was more vulnerable to get trapped in that than my sisters. Because like when I was born, I had an 18-month-old sister and a 3-year-old sister, and my mother had massive unresolved trauma. So she neglected me far more than my elder sister, who she could cope with. My other sister, 3, was like, she was gone. So she neglected me a lot, and she acknowledged that when I was an adult. So yeah, we do need to look at, we stop projecting. If we keep saying it's because of our past, and there's a story behind that, but if we keep saying it's because of our past, then we keep giving the power away. And it's kind of like we're saying, unless you recognize something, I can't be free. And I really want to encourage women that we can be free now. You don't have to wait for society to change laws or anything to be free in yourself.
Absolutely. Yes. Did you hear that? I love that. It's so true. And I got the victim blaming one the other day, and I'm like, no, I haven't been a victim. There's no way I'm going to victim blame. But you have to get to some point in your life when you're ready to take responsibility. And I know for myself, I was very insecure, and I'm sure that read very loud to someone who connected with someone like myself. So I know that I had to go back and heal year after year, therapy session after therapy session, and realize, wait a minute. And then I had to get to the point where I had to make sure that I prevented it from happening again. What do I need to heal inside of myself so that my next relationship doesn't look like this one? And it's not victim blaming. It's taking a look in the mirror and healing. And I love that visual that you just did, because I always felt, even when I was in my relationship, that deep down on the inside, there was this Lisa, there was this free woman who wanted to soar. The woman that I am now, but that other woman, oh no, docile and quiet and a people pleaser, codependent. So it was just all these things until I did the work and took off the layers. And sometimes you regress, but you get back to the work. It's work. It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah. So. And what I do is, like, if you think about an elastic band, it can only stretch so far, yeah? And if you want to move the elastic band forward, you've got to, that elastic band's got to go back a little bit to bring that forward to go forward again. Does that make sense?
Good. Yeah, that's good.
So we might, if we can relabel the regressing into that, if we're getting pulled backwards, there's some gold there for us to help us to move further forward. And so if we can just become curious and label it as there's information here rather than judgmental, this is bad, I'm failing or whatever, then we can get the information we need and it will help us move even further along.
That is so good. That is so good. You know that, so you said something earlier that it reminded me of a season that I had gone through. You talked about when someone is in a traumatic or abusive relationship, it's just trauma, and you don't realize until you're out of it how much trauma you've been dealing with. And I always kind of try to put it in a visual. I'm a visual person, but you know, when you're at like a supermarket and all the stuff is rolling on the thing, and then all of a sudden it starts to back up, and everything is just chaotic. And I kind of felt like that. Like after I got out of my relationship, I kind of crashed because I didn't realize that I was always at this heightened sense of trauma, always trying to survive, always trying to protect the children, always trying to do something. And then when I got out of it, it was like I literally physically crashed.
Yes. What's happening is if you visualize a band in the middle, and inside that band we're writing optimal arousal zone, and inside that band both hemispheres are connected, we've got all access to everything and we can process. But when we're in stress and overwhelm, we jump out of that band, and so we go up above the band, and that's hyper arousal zone where we're thinking fast, doing, which we're often in when we're in an abusive relationship. But we can't sustain being there. And what happens is we crash below that band into the hypo-arousal, where we feel flat, numb, depressed, no energy. And we often jump back and forwards between hyper and hypo-arousal because we don't have the mind-body skills to be able to stay in that band to process what's been overwhelming.
So how do you get to that part? If you have someone that's listening right now, they're going up and down, up and down. How do they get to that center part where they're able to balance it?
Well, there's a couple of mind-body skills. Like I've created a package that I can do for women online, one-on-one and as a group, where I teach all of the skills over 8 weeks. Or you can do a private one where we speed it up one-on-one, where I teach you a simple tool, mind-body tool to get your brain connected, and a few mind-body tools to process the trauma so that you can stay in that band with uncomfortable feelings, memories, flashbacks, thoughts, the limiting thoughts and things. And so when you've got some mind-body skills, you can stay in that band. But it's not just positive thinking, because I just wrote about this yesterday. If we have positive thinking but our feelings and our body aren't aligned with it, it's like our energy is going in 2 different directions. We're split. Our system can't feel it because the brain has what we've consciously learned how to be in the world, and is very related to what is rational, present, and connected to the past. Anything that's overwhelming or untapped is in the body. That's where the unconscious lives. And so when you have difficult experiences, if you say a positive statement that sounds nice and how you want to be in your head, but your unconscious in your body doesn't feel aligned with it, you're not in alignment and you don't get the benefit. It's like you can't digest the food of it. You can't get the nutrients out of that statement because your body isn't experiencing that. And so we need to find ways to be able to acknowledge where we are, but help support that transition out of it in a way that is feels good, because nobody wants to feel bad. And so in my work, when my daughter had this breakdown as a young adult, it really impacted my health as well, because I was with her so much, and I'd just written my first book and I couldn't run my business because I had to be with her and my granddaughter. And so I went in a bit of a dark space. And even though I was functioning and managing such a high degree of stress with what we were living with, you know, it was still impacting me. And it was like I had to go on another journey to, well, what can I access that can enable me to be okay, even when there's things that are not in my control?
Right,
and
right.
I had made that promise when I escaped, when he started taking me through court to punish me, that never again was he going to control my inner world. But I'd only kind of made that for people that I didn't want to be involved with. And it was like I got to another level with, well, here's someone I want to stay involved with, but I can't let what's happening with them rob me of my inner well-being.
Correct.
And so I went searching for even more tools beyond what I'd learned in my psychotherapy. And so I provided a toolkit so that you can have, it's kind of like internalizing a good parent that acknowledges where you are and helps you move to where you want to get to.
Right.
And it's gentle, and it's I use it all the time, and it's you know, so I do webinars on that so people can access that quickly and easily. You don't even have to do the whole you know, the whole group process with me. So yeah, there's lots of good tools that we can use that can make life easier.
So I hope you guys heard that. So if you're interested, hang on till the end, because we are going to give you all her information so you can get in contact with her, join some of her groups, do one-on-ones. Guys, this is important because I think that if we don't get to the point where we're connected together, where we have that connection and that peace and healing, that we just continue the cycle. And I think you made a really good point earlier when you talked about positive statements, because we're a world that just say positive statements and just be encouraged and start your morning off with you can say positive statements all day. But if it's not connected here, and if you don't feel it and you're not, it's just a positive statement that you're saying.
Yeah, it's too far away. And what it's kind of doing is sometimes it's repeating what we've experienced in childhood or in abusive relationships, where we've got to act like everything's fine when it's not.
Right.
And we're denying our reality and our feelings. And so it's not about ignoring how we're feeling, but there's ways that we can be with our feelings that can help, as I said, that transition happen really quickly so that you're not stuck in it. But it's just, you've got to be where you are to get to where you want to get to. You can't, unless you take all of you, you're going to get tripped up and get triggers and things. And I think of it like, if you look at your GPS on your phone, if you put in the GPS where the destination of where you are, and you don't put in the destination of where you want to get to, you can't move anywhere. There's no direction. There's no clarity.
True.
If you just put in the location of where you want to get to, but you don't put in the destination of where you currently are, again, you can't get there. You need to have both, and then you can see the markers along the way when you've got the right tools. And it can be, and then it becomes not so much of, I want to hurry up and get to a healed place, because we can always evolve and grow. It becomes, I'm enjoying the journey because each part is precious, because I'm reconnecting to who I am and my power and my life energy. And I like the way I'm responding to my feelings and my thoughts, because like every single woman that I've spoken to, when I go out and speak at events and things, I'll ask, did you have early warning signs? And every single woman, and I'm really interested to hear feedback if it's different for some women, every single woman says yes. And so to me, there's a history of us tuning out our internal wisdom, and we pay attention to what's outside of us.
Yes, exactly. And if we're honest, there were signs. It may not have been what you would have known, but something didn't seem right. And we ignored that inner gut that said, you know? Yeah.
Because I think we overvalue the conscious mind, and the conscious mind values concrete things that are right in front of us.
Right.
But the unconscious can pick things up quickly. And what I always say is, by the time it becomes conscious and concrete, it's already formed. You can play around and change and create things before it becomes into consciousness, as long as you can trust your instinct and your intuition. And so my passion is helping women to connect to their inner knowledge, their unconscious, their instinct, their intuition, because then life becomes clearer and simpler.
And it teaches us we can trust that intuition, that gut, that, you know, God-given thing inside of us. It's so funny because I don't even know if I've told this part of my story to people before, but the day before, it was the night before I was getting married to my ex-husband. And I was sitting on the stairs with my brother, and I said, I don't think I'm supposed to marry him. And he said to me, you have to. Everyone's coming. Everything's paid for. I mean, we had all the family in town, spent all this money. If you have to. And I thought, okay. But I'll never forget that. I remember when he got married, I said, I gave him the same opportunity I feel like he took from me. I said, you don't have to do this. And his fiance said, yes, he does. I said, no, he doesn't. I want you to know, I want you to be sure that you're going to want to do this. And so for me, I'll never forget that inside of me, it said, I don't think I'm supposed to marry him. I knew. Yet and still,
I've got goosebumps now.
And imagine if at that moment I had trusted my instinct, my inner self that said no, and a thing too about abusers is that's what they don't want you to trust. Because I believe that God has given women this intuition, this gut thing, we just know stuff sometimes. And if we leave or if we acknowledge their lies or their actual abuse, then they lose that power and that control that they had over us. And so if they can quiet that voice, that little itty bitty thing inside that you just showed, and cover it over with different levels of trauma, we're so hidden we can't see.
Yeah, and that's our power. Yeah, that deep inner knowing is our power. And we get pulled into other people's story and reality of what they want us to live in. Right, and we need to stay. And that comes back to what I was saying about loving ourselves. Wow. Like with your beautiful, heart-moving story then. Mm-hmm. It's about loving yourself more than being accepted by the family and the friends and everyone, isn't it? It's like, no. I don't know if in my book I quoted the poem, and I'm going blank on the Invitation. Have you ever read The Invitation?
I don't think so. Mm-mm.
Oh, it's an amazing poem, and there's one verse in it where it talks about, I'd rather betray you than betray myself.
Ooh, that's so good.
Oh, it's such a powerful.
That's so good.
Yeah. And I used to just repeat that to myself to remind me when I was in a conflict with someone I cared about. It's like, no, bottom line is, I don't want to betray me. I know what that feels like. I don't want to do that again.
Yes. Oh my goodness. You just excite me. Oh my gosh. And I don't know. I just love it. I love it. And I love that you just work to empower women. You know what I mean? That's so powerful. I don't want to betray. I don't want to betray myself. I would rather betray you. And I feel like if you're listening and you take anything away from what we said, don't allow yourself to ever betray yourself again.
Yeah.
If I would have gotten off that staircase and took my power back in that moment, my journey and my story would be very different. I have no regrets, but I wouldn't have had to go through the pain, that I went through. But I think you're amazing, and we probably could talk for 20 hours. But I want to ask you a couple of kind of closing questions. So, do you think that people can heal from trauma? Because we talked earlier about, talk to women who 27 years and 30 years, and I'm gonna always be single, and I just will never trust again. I've been hurt too bad. What do you say to those women?
Absolutely. I'm no special person that I can heal and so another woman can't. As I grew up in utero with trauma, I grew up with a really toxic, traumatic environment, went into a really toxic relationship, and I feel like I'm very functional now. I'm so different. Before, when I was 16 and I was in a relationship, I used to think something in my head and I wouldn't say it because I felt like it was complete. There was no point. I was so used to it not making any difference. And I used to, when I was in school, I had no friends. I was bullied all the time. I used to sit there and just rub my head and watch dandruff fall. Like, it's really odd to think of doing that. But I was I felt so invisible that I didn't even feel like anybody saw me. I used to have so much anxiety. I had night terrors and night sweats flooding the bed, and I used to scratch myself, my head and my face, till there was blood all over me.
Wow.
It's like I'm sharing that so that people can know, yes, you can go from that to this.
Yes.
It is possible. And just in regards to the trusting, can I trust other people again? I say it's not about who should I trust out there in the world. It's about learning to connect to your own body, your energy, your feelings, and when you can trust that, it will guide you through everything.
Yes. Did you hear that? Yes. Yes, that's it. Because we're focused outward. But if we would focus inward, it would be so different. We wouldn't even let things come our way that we knew were unhealthy or unsafe.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
We'd see it a mile off.
We'd see it a mile off.
Yeah. When I was single, I remember being on the dating site, and my intuition, because I've been doing this work for a while, knew, picked up things even before a conversation. It was like, no. And every now and then I would go, I'm going to test this no out. And I'd start a conversation, and then there'd be a real clangor of evidence. And
I knew it.
Like, so trust your sensings. Don't wait for it to get bigger. Trust it when it's little. And you'll get through everything quicker.
Yes, I love it. Yes. And one of the things that abusers like to do is help you to not trust yourself. Because if you have to totally rely on them and trust them and their word and everything that they say, but if you just take the time, like she said, to get back to you and to healing you, and I'm going to give you her information at the end too, by the way, because honestly, amazing, just amazing. I think I have one more question. So before we end the podcast, what is something that you would want them to know, that you would like to say to them or share with them? Or
can I squeeze in two things?
Of course. One.
One thing is, as well as the the stress response, fight, flight, and freeze. You've heard of them, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard that women have a unique stress response additional to those three?
Nope.
Those three were only tested on men, and it was just assumed that women are the same. And a number of years ago, a woman spent, a couple of decades testing to find out, are we the same or different? And she found that, yes, we do have the fight, flight, freeze response. But we have another stress response, and she named it the tending instinct.
Say it again, the what?
The tending instinct.
Tending instinct, okay.
Tend, mend, and befriend. Dr. Shelley E. Taylor. And it's all about our estrogen and oxytocin levels get mobilized under stress to, if we think about historically, to survive, we needed the tribe. We couldn't survive on our own. So the female's job was to look after, keep the family, the tribe together. It wasn't about thinking about yourself. It was about keeping the family together. And so we've got that happening on top of us being robbed of our sense of self, that we're thinking about the group. But nowadays we don't have to do that for us to survive, or the family. Right. So I think it's important for women to know there's that, but that gets addressed when you learn those mind-body tools, that's supported. But the other thing I think is important to remember is women often say to me, I don't know what the right boundary is. I don't know what's fair or what's right. And as soon as you ask yourself, is that right or is that fair? You're jumping out of your own skin and imagining what other people think is right. Wow. Yeah. So I'm suggesting my parting message is, your boundaries are yours, and it's not about what someone else thinks is right. It's about what's right for you right now, because your boundaries might fluctuate and change from day to day or from hour to hour, depending on your energy, what's happening in your life. Just the feminine principle, I work a lot with the feminine principle, is about flexible responsiveness. And so allow, and the feminine principle is about allowing and being receptive, not to other people, to you. Because imagine if we all did that, if we all didn't betray ourselves, if we all prioritized ourselves, relationships would be so much cleaner and clearer, and we wouldn't have to do this emotional baggage, silent contracts with each other. So so just your boundaries are right for you right now. Right.
Yes, trust your boundaries. So, that's so good. I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I just feel like you just gave us such a plethora of information. And if you need to listen to this again, listen to it again, listen to it again, get it inside of you so you understand the principles of what Anita is saying. So where can they find you? Where can they contact you? Where can they join your group or your class? And you have books, so please take your time. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, I'll show you. This was the first book that I wrote, The Wolf in a Suit. And if you can see it on the video, it's quite big. A third of the book is my story, but about 2/3 of it is me speaking as a psychotherapist. And in it, I start with the story of Little Red Riding Hood, which you can see is me on the cover. But I interpret the story differently in my teaching story. And then there's 10 other fairy tales in the part 2, where I reinterpret the fairy tales to give teaching stories about family, stress, relationships, a whole lot of things, so that it's a fun way to learn new things. And the thing that most women, the comment that women have made the most to me about reading this is that they can't put it down, which I think is pretty awesome given what it's about and how big it is. Yeah. So that's The Wolf in a Suit. You can get from my website or from Amazon or Book Depository. I've got 2 ebooks that will be converted into books next year. The Ultimate Formula for Moving Forward is one ebook. And in there, I do teach that first brain exercise. So you can go on my website, anitabentata.com, and get that. And you've got the first exercise. And this is based on, I just number all of the steps of what I did to recover. And it's just a guideline there to help you to stay on track. And the editor that edited that said, this is good for any trauma, when he edited it. It's not just abusive relationships. It's a great guide. And then I wrote The Crazy Making Verbal Emotional Abuse Explained, because I was fed up with women coming to me and saying, oh, I'm abusive too. And so here I've unpacked, it was about 30, can't remember how many, about 30 different abusive tactics. And I explained how it's different when someone that's using abuse does it, and when you're in an abusive relationship, why it's not the same thing. And so that's my book about that.
We can find the books where? On Amazon as well?
Not those ebooks, they're just straight from my website. AnitaBentata.com. But otherwise you can get my book, The Wolf in a Suit, from Amazon or from my website. Okay. And if you want to reach me other than my website, you can find me on Instagram under Anita Bentata, or you can join, when you're a woman, you can join my Big Hearted Women community on Facebook. And there I give daily resources and support. And we're not just a group on Facebook, we're a community. And I plan, as the group grows, that I'm going to travel the world and run events so I can meet all these big-hearted, amazing women as they open their big heart to love themselves. But we're going to create a momentum to reach 10 million women. And so
that's a good number.
Yes. So that we can help other women get through everything quicker. And yeah, so join me at the Big Hearted Women community on Facebook.
Okay. I can share that as well on my page. So I'll share that so we can have some ladies
awesome.
reach out and join. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You are a gift to this world. You know that? Just amazing.
Oh, you are too, Lisa. I'm so
happy. Thank you so much. And we'll be talking again soon. And I'm getting that book. I love a good book, and that thick book just gets me so excited. And I'll share. So AnitaBentata.com. Yep. And is that where they can join any of your classes and stuff like that as well?
To join, my website's not updated right now. There are some courses on there that they can look at, but if they go to, maybe I'll pin a post on one of my, I've got 3 business pages on Facebook.
Okay.
So if you put my name in on Facebook, it should come up with all my business pages. Okay, and perfect. So if you go, I've got The Wolf in a Suit based on my book, one of the business pages. I'll pin a post on there that shows all of the key things of the groups that I've got that are online and offline, so that people can know what I've got on now. But I've also got a webinar happening in January.
Okay.
if people, and that's where I'm teaching that one tool that can help transition you to getting to that positive statement you want to get to, but doing it without going into the past, but acknowledging where you are.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the pin post is going to have where we can join that in January?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
awesome.
will I'll put the pinned post up. I've got to go to another appointment after this.
Okay,
so I'll
okay,
do that
awesome.
later this afternoon.
Awesome.
So then it will have the groups that I spoke about before, so that you can know about that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Anita. We appreciate you. All right, take care.
I appreciate you too.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.